Happy Sunday, everybody. At the end of the week, I like to go over some of the meta breakers, and these are off-meta picks that caught my attention and were at least above a 60% win rate for at least 50 matches on the best of one ladder. And so to start things off here, we've got the Abzan Ratadrabik deck, and it's centered around Ratadrabik of Urborg, which is a legendary zombie wizard with Vigilance and Ward 2, and your zombies have Vigilance. And then whenever a legendary creature you control dies, you create a token that's a 2/2 zombie that is not a legendary. And so you're basically playing a whole bunch of legendary tribal that then comes back as zombies. And so you get, when the token enters the battlefield, you get your interesting ETB effects. So like Honest Rutstein being able to bring a creature back from the graveyard because the thing that's left, the zombie left over, is not a legendary. You can end up playing Honest Rutstein again. So you can do some really creative, fun loops based off of your legendary creatures with interesting ETBs. And you've also got like Glissa Sunslayer is a legendary, the Kambal Profiteering Mayor, which whenever one of your tokens enters the battlefield, you then create a token that's a copy of it. And because they're not legendaries, you get multiple copies of your Glissa Sunslayer zombies and such. And so there's some really cool synergies in this deck. And then not to mention that like your zombies have Vigilance, so giving the Sunslayer as a first strike Death Toucher with Vigilance means that you can attack in and still keep up the oppressive blocker. And so this deck is doing some really cool things. Definitely thought was worth checking out. Oh yeah, so let me kind of elaborate a little bit further on what I mean by off meta, right? So this week, what I've decided to do is stay away from anything that's mono red prowess, mono white humans, Boros Convoke, mono red aggro, Azorius Control, mono black aggro, mono blue tempo, mono black skeletons, Rakdos aggro, Boros heroic, or the Demir Midrange Profs Steam Core deck. So there's quite a list of stuff that is in the meta right now. The standard meta is quite diverse, which is wonderful. But it's also kind of fun to go off of the beaten path, right? And so this one is another one that's centered around the legendary synergies. This one is Annie Joins Up. And this one, the previous list had 53 wins and 35 losses and for 60% win rate. This one has 32 and 17, so it didn't quite actually make the 50 matches that I'd like it to have, but it did have a 65% win rate, so even if it lost the next match, it would still be okay. But yeah, this one's centered around the Annie Joins Up. Well, I guess this is more of an honorary mention because there is only one copy of it. But it kind of summarizes what the deck is trying to do, which is center around legendary triggered abilities. And so you've got like one copy of the Roaming Throne allows you to do it as well, because a lot of the legendaries in this space are human. And then you've got things like the Girid Mirror of the Wilds, which allows you to create a copy of a token that entered. So there's like a token sub-theme that's going on as well. You've got the Railway Brawler, which gives you nice tokens. Same with the Helena and Elena. You've got some Wedding Announcement and Adeline for creating the little 1/1s. Bristly Bill to make things bigger. Baird to also help with the 1/1 theme. And yeah, just kind of going wide while also creating a whole bunch of tokens on your creatures. This week, I'm also going to cover a couple of lists that aren't going to go onto the poll. So every week, what I like to do is I put a poll up and you guys vote on which one I should run for 50 matches on the best of one ladder. And so there's going to be a couple that I'm going to talk about this week that are looking to me like they're relatively well positioned for the current meta, but are kind of off meta picks, but that are more popular in like best of three, or, I can only choose 4 really to put on the poll. So this week, Esper Midrange by Enigma went 44 and 20 for a 69% win rate, which was quite good. And so this one is running both the copies of Virtue of Loyalty and Wedding Announcement, and not bringing in the Duelist of the Mind that we got in Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So this is just kind of the old build of Esper Midrange. And but it has been performing particularly well on the meta. And so, if you're looking for, the reason why I brought this up is because a lot of people are pulling their hair about there being so much control in best of 3, and then there being so much aggro in best of 1. And so you do have the opportunity, I think, for a short period of time. The Esper Midrange looks like it's doing okay, if you are a midrange fan. And then this list was a domain list by NVMTR. And this one's also not going to be on the poll, but it went 37 and 25 for a 60% win rate, and kind of was doing some interesting things. So we see the Cartographer's Survey, which is being played over the Invasion of Zendikar because of how much Tidebinder has been played in best of 3. You don't see it as much in best of 1, so I was kind of curious to see the Cartographer's Survey being played here in the best of 1 list. We do see the Virtue of Persistence, which we tend to see more often in the best of 1 list because it is particularly good against the mono red aggro. And then we've also got 4 copies of the Temporary Lockdown to really hate on the Boros Convoke. And this one I thought was an interesting inclusion. 2 copies of the Intrepid Adversary, and and 2 copies of the Imidane's Recruiter. So kind of giving you the lifelink for a little bit of early stabilization against the aggro in best of 1 might be worth exploring. And it's kind of like, instead of the get losts, and you're playing the life gain instead. And then also Analyze the Pollen I thought was pretty clever, because we've dropped the Atraxa count down to 2. So Analyze the Pollen can be used to, if you have the evidence 8, be able to go and tutor for something that you need specifically. Other than that, it's just like your typical shell for domain. Notably, they are deciding to cut all 3 copies of the Topiary Stomper too, which usually you see the Cartographer's Survey or the Invasion of Zendikar being played in tandem with the Topiary Stompers. So that was a different approach. But we're running 1 copy of the Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, which can prevent the enter the battlefield effects of the Boros Convoke strategy, as well as kind of be a pain for other domain lists and teamer control. So we see this one as a best of 3 sideboard option that is being brought into the main here. And so, it could be worth giving it a shot if you like the domain as well. It is a control deck, but maybe a different style than Azorius Control, and was doing well this week. All right, and so this one is Golgari Midrange, or Golgari Bronco, because it is running the Caustic Bronco. And this one is also going to be skipped from the poll, but this one was a list by Kron Dragon that went 33 and 20 for a 62% win rate in Mythic. And it's doing a lot of what we've seen Golgari Midrange doing in the past, running the Archfiend of the Dross, which is kind of come and go, bumping Glissa Sunslayer up to 3 copies from just 1. We've 1 exploration of the Pillage of the Bog, or Pillage the Bog, which allows you to tutor. You get to look at the top X card, twice X cards of your library, where X is the number of lands that you control, and look up for the thing that you need. 2 copies of the Tranquil Frillback, which helps stabilize against the mono red in best of 1. And we've got 3 copies of Duress, which, again, I've talked about this one throughout the weeks. I do think you can get away with main boarding Duress, unless you bump into mono white humans, which is really the only list that's going to punish you for having Duress in the main. And other than that, though, just kind of, a lot of the typical Golgari midrange shell that we've covered a lot, so I don't want to, I'm mixing things up. I'm not trying to cover each card individually. So let me know if you like it, or if you want me to go in more detail in the future. I'm trying to paint with broad strokes this time around. And then the 6th one here that I'd like to cover is the 4-color ramp deck by Stormfather. This one will be on the poll. It had an impressive 101 to 58, so over 150 matches with a 64% win rate in Mythic. So this is definitely doing something right? And this is kind of like the Celestia ramp deck that I showcased a couple weeks ago, but then playing 4 colors for some payoffs, like we get to run the Colossal Sky Turtle, we get to bring in Atraxa, just 1 copy there, we get 1 copy of the Bonnie Paul Clear Cutter. Still ramping, though, into Tyrant is really like the large payoff. Elish Norn, again, to hate against Boros Convoke and the Teamer Control or the Teamer Landfall combo deck. We get the Thalia and the Gitrog monster, which allows you to ramp more, has some interesting synergies within this space. One copy of the Buried in the Garden for a little bit of removal, and so Courier's Briefcase, which we've seen kind of come and go from a lot of domain lists, kind of fell out of fashion, but being able to ramp into, but also give you a 1/1 chump blocker works well against mono red, historically. We've got 4 copies of the Goldvein Hydra, which was a mythic that we got in Outlaws of Thunder Junction that when it dies creates X treasure tokens, which is equal to its power. So basically just a whole bunch of stuff that's looking to ramp out to big threats and then cover those big threats from getting countered by Cavern of Souls. And Smuggler's Surprise here, being able to play 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield, allows you to, once you hit the 5 or the 6 mana, immediately just start playing some of your really big threats. So pretty cool idea. Definitely doing something right. There's a lot of Azusa's mini journeys and things that allow you to like play an additional land this turn from your hand, which historically I haven't really liked. I like more of the tutor effect of, or where you go and look for something like explosive vegetation kind of thing. But definitely want to try this one out on the ladder personally and just see how it does. And then by popular demand, I'm sorry to leave you hanging until the last one, right? But it was requested that I cover Simic Cookies. And so this one was one that I pulled from my favorite best of one tracker. It is not particularly well positioned in the best of one meta. It was rocking a 56% win rate over 450 matches. And but I try to please. So this week, this will be on the poll. If you want me to play Simic Cookies, this is the list that I would bring. It is running Lost Jite, which we got from the Outlaws of Thunder Junction, which I think fits nicely into the archetype. And then I'll have to craft a Surge Engine because I've been postponing that one since, gosh, way back when. But then I have the rest of it, right? And we did get the Botanical Sanctum from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, which helps us in the Simic space. Especially, this is a relatively aggressive curve. If you are unfamiliar with it, and the reason why it's called Simic Cookies is because of Ginger Brute and Tough Cookie. And you have a whole bunch of affinity for synergies with artifacts. So you've got like the Zoetic Glyph, you've got the Spyglass Siren that spawns you the map token, you get the Teething Wormlet that gets bigger every time an artifact enters the battlefield, and then you've got Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which allows you to give your creatures the +1/+1, and then they get the abilities of whatever you're doing. So you can make your other stuff have the ability to be unblockable except for by creatures with haste. So giving things the Ginger Brute ability is kind of handy. And yeah, so that's going to be the final one for this week's Meta Breakers. I hope you guys have all been enjoying the spring weather. I know there's been some bad weather across the country, and but today I got to frolic in my garden, so I'm in a pretty good mood. And remember to click like and subscribe if you like this sort of thing. I try to do one of these off-meta picks every Sunday, and then I'll be going over my typical meta review where we talk about the more popular decks every Monday. So have a wonderful weekend, or at least what's left of it, and I'll catch you all tomorrow for the meta review. Take care, everybody.